from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about a bill in the Indiana House of Representatives, Bill 1136, about the possibility of dissolving IPS because more than half of their students go to chartered schools. Stay tuned. Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network, and I am Reverend Charles Harrison, and I just want to wish everybody a happy new year. This is the first show of 2020-25, and I'm so excited about the new year. And today I want to start out my podcast with, dealing with what seems to be a very hot topic right now in Indianapolis, and it is House Bill 1136. This bill has certainly got the attention of a lot of people, and even me as a parent. I'm really focused on this bill. House Bill 1136 is a bill that would dissolve IPS schools and 4 other districts in which more than half the students in the district attend charter schools. One of the other districts that is included in this bill certainly would be the schools in Gary, where more than half the students, in those school districts attends chartered schools. Now, I have a lot of feelings about this, and certainly there's a lot of things that when I first heard about this, I was feeling somewhat in between as to whether or not I really supported this bill or whether I was against this bill. And I tried to come from the perspectives of my own experience as a parent, having 4 children that went through public schools, but a couple of my children at one time did attend charter school. So I have the experience of both of those. And I will say I bring to the table, at one time, my 2 youngest kids, early on in their schooling, attended a private school. So my kids have been in private school, they've been in charter school, and they have been in public school. There's a lot of things that are going through my mind because, really, when I think about this bill, and I'm from Jeffersonville, Indiana. I grew up and went to school there, graduated from Jeffersonville High School. For those of you who don't know where that is, it's down on the Ohio River, right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. I went to a public school. I did well. Went on from public school to undergrad at Indiana University in Bloomington. Received my undergrad degree. Went there to graduate school in Ohio at Methodist Theological School Seminary, received my Master's of Divinity, and then I went on to get my doctorate. So certainly I am a benefactory, I benefited from being in public school, done well, ended up going to both undergrad and graduate school in college. So my views of public schools is different, but I grew up in a small town on the Ohio River. I know that it's probably different from the urban city. Well, I know it's different from larger cities where we have these large numbers of children of color, and many of them tend to struggle when it comes to academically. For instance, in the city of Indianapolis, in IPS, when we look at IPS, 37% of the students are black. Now 35% of the students in IPS are Latino, and 20 to 22% of the students are white. So we're looking at whatever decisions are being made it's going to impact a large number of children of color. And that is important to me when you begin to talk about the education of children of color. Now, before I get started, I want you to know that I am a proponent of school choice. I believed in that. And I think the numbers that you are seeing right now in Indianapolis when it comes to IPS and is leaders in the community, people like myself who have been certainly promoting giving parents like myself a choice when it came to our children's education. So certainly I believe in parents having a choice where they send their children to school. And I think it can differ from child to child in your own household. I've had 4 kids. My oldest son graduated from Ben Davis High School. My second oldest, which is my daughter, Shayla, went 1 year to Heron High School, charter school. The last 3 years, she went to Broad Ripple High School, graduated. My oldest daughter, went on to undergrad and graduate school. She just completed 2 years ago her master's degree. Did well in both charter and public school. My oldest son, who graduated from Ben Davis, he went to college and went to Purdue. I now have a son who just graduated last year. His first 3 years, he was at Shortridge High School. Then I got him into a smaller setting for his last year of school. That really fit my son better than being at Shortridge. My youngest child now, Jalen, is completing her senior year at Shortridge High School. Shortridge fits her better. And what I like is the fact that I had choices as a parent. I had choices whether to keep my kids in public school because of where I live at or to enroll them in a charter school. I like the fact that I had a choice. And I really think that is important, that we give parents like myself a choice. I would go even further and say I wish there was a third choice, because I know that when it comes to the tax dollars, a lot of people are not in favor of tax dollars going to private schools. But I think the private schools that my children were in early on were good and beneficial to them, and I think it's put them on a pathway of success, in school. Now, Bill 1136 that is in the House right now certainly is getting a lot of pushback from elements within the black community that are not supportive of this, that are supportive of public schools. And the whole possibility of dissolving IPS is controversial. And I'm hearing what the sponsors of the bill would like is for IPS to share some of the money that they're getting and property. And I understand that. I think that is a conversation that we ought to have. But I'm against altogether dissolving IPS because I think it takes away from me as a parent, and I think other parents feel this way too, choice. We want choice. We want choice whether or not we would want our children in public school or in a charter school. One of the reasons I pulled Shayla out of the charter school, Heron, was it did not offer some of the athletic opportunities that my daughter wanted because she ran track. And for her, she wanted to be able to continue to pursue that. Now, I know today that some of those schools are offering athletics for kids, and a lot of the charter schools today are offering a lot of similarities to what people are getting, students are getting in public schools. But the fact that I had that choice based on the setting that I preferred as a parent and what me and my wife felt like was best for our kids is what I liked. I don't think it's helpful when most of the kids that we're talking about are kids of color, and legislators are making decisions that's going to affect children of color when it comes to choices that, whether you are a Latino or Black parent, you're making about what you think is in the best interest of your child. I think there needs to be conversation and dialogue really concerning this whole issue about House Bill 1136. The fact that I think that more students in the district are attending charter schools is because many of us leaders have been pushing parents making choices for what is best for their child. And I think that that's good. My youngest son, just didn't do well in the larger setting at Shortridge High School. I think there were things that was going on, and it had nothing to do with the school. The fact that some of the students that tend to go to public schools, particularly in large urban areas, maybe some of the young people who may be struggling academically. And I know there's this comparison that charter schools do better than public schools. I'm not for sure that's true. I'm just not for sure that's true, because public schools have to take all of the kids, and I'm not sure that charter schools are taking the most challenging kids that public schools have to take. And I know that there are some very challenging students that attend public schools who may be 1, 2, or 3 years behind academically. And I know that is the case, that there are students that attend public schools that tend to be behind. And they can be 1 grade, 2 grade, 3 grades behind, and some even more than that. And I think the real issue is, how do we address what those root causes are that is causing so many of our students, particularly in urban areas? And let's really get to this, because most of what we're talking about is happening in urban settings. When you talk about what's going on in Indianapolis or a city like Gary, you're talking about what's going on in urban areas, and you're talking about what's happening with children of color, Black students, and particularly Latino students, Black and brown students. So I think that whatever we're talking about when it comes to education, parents ought to be at the table, community leaders should be at the table when it comes to what is best for our children. And I know that the sponsors of House Bill 1136 mean well. I think they want what is best for the children, but I think they need to have conversations with parents who have children in the system, who attend IPS schools, or parents that made the decision to take their children from IPS school and to put them in a charter school. And I think for all of us parents, there are different reasons why we may move our child from a public school to a charter school. And I think we need to be at the table when it comes to these discussions about where our children are going to go to school. And I think this is a real issue that we cannot ignore, and that we need to be at the table and a part of that conversation. Now, I personally believe this, and I know I'm going to get in trouble with some people who are proponents of public schools. I have a couple of colleagues and friends, one of my best friends who's on the school board at Pike, for the Pike Township School District, who certainly is a proponent of public schools. And their concern is that charter schools are going to take money away from public schools. I think that is the issue. I think that is the issue. I think that's the issue that House Bill 1136 is dealing with, in the fact that if more students in the IPS district are going to charter schools, when it comes to property and resources, where those resources should they go based on the taxes? And I think that's a real conversation. I'm one that has always believed that the money ought to follow the students. And I still believe that the money ought to follow the student. I believe that should be the case. Now, I'm different from some people, and I know some people would not want to see this happen, particularly when it comes to private schools. But I think as parents ought to be able to make the choice to where they want to send their child or children to school. And I don't think that low-income parents should be forced to make choices about what's best for their child based on the fact that they may not be able to afford to send their child to a private school if they feel like that private school is best for their child when it comes to their child's education. I think we ought to be creating choices. A parent ought to be able to choose between a public school, a charter school, and a private school. What is best for their children. My youngest son, a smaller setting was better for him. He went from struggling in Shortridge with C's and D's and barely passing some classes to when I got him in another setting, which was a much smaller setting, because my youngest son, I know a lot about him. He's easy distracted. He's trying to fit in. He's trying, sometimes I think, to overcompensate, to be liked. So then sometimes he misbehaved. But when I got him in another setting, because me and his mother understood our son very well and what would be best suited for him, he went from C's and D's to A's and B's. Because where we got him at was a much smaller setting. He did a lot of individual studying, which he did better at that than a larger group setting in a classroom, given the instructions, given some assistance and guidance. And in that kind of setting, my youngest son thrived. He thrived in that kind of setting. He ended up graduated from high school and now is in college. That setting was better for my younger son. But I had the choice as a parent where to send my son. My youngest daughter is doing very well in a public school in Shortridge High School. She has all kind of college scholarship offers. She likes that kind of setting at Shortridge High School in Indianapolis. I have 4 children. 2 of my oldest 2 children who graduated from public schools have college degrees. One has a master's degree and will be working on her PhD. I think there are other issues other than public schools that we don't want to address because I believe that education starts at home. I believe that parents who value education and instill that in their children, regardless of what kind of school setting they're in, are going to do well. Whether it's a public school, a charter school, or a private school, it starts at home. Whether you low income, middle class, or upper class, you have to value education, and valuing education starts at home. If you don't prioritize it at home, if it's not valued at home, then your child or children may not do as well in school. And I think that's what we're seeing. When you're in the 4th grade and you're still reading at a 1st grade level, that's a problem. And I believe that it starts at home. I believe that there is enough opportunities out there, starting from preschool to kindergarten to private settings, that are trying to get children equipped at an early age so that by the time they get to kindergarten and the first grade, these children are competing academically at their grade level. But it's difficult to get thousands of kids at that place if education in the home is not prioritized and valued. It's not just because kids are poor that they're not doing well. There are some kids who grew up poor that do very well academically in elementary, in middle school, in high school, and go on to college and grad school, and many have gotten their doctorate and PhD, who grew up poor. Dissolving IPS is not the answer to the problem. We ought to be providing choices for parents. And the more education that we do in educating parents about what their choices are, the better it will be for our children in the future. What I would like to see the legislators focus on are the real issues that is causing the disparity when it comes to the education of our children, particularly in urban settings. And how do we address that? I support public schools, I support charter schools, I support private schools. I believe the money ought to follow the child. That may not be popular with a lot of people. This may be the compromise, but I believe that the funding ought to follow the child. And it's based on the decisions that parents make about what they feel is best for their child or their children. We ought not to punish IPS because they're starting more charter schools, and we have a lot of charter schools in the IPS district that a lot of us parents are choosing to send our kids to. There are reasons why we're sending our kids to charter school and may not to public school. In some families, you may have some of the children in public schools and some in charter schools because as parents, we're trying to put our child in what we feel like is the best setting for them to strive academically. It is a choice. What I feel is the best setting for my child to learn. And I may choose that a small setting is better for my child to learn, and it's not anything against IPS. It's about me making a choice what is best for my child. I think that's the issue that we ought to be addressing. It's more about what's best for me as a parent in making a decision about the education for my children. The compromise, in my opinion, ought to be this: that state legislators ought not to be afraid to say that the money should follow the child. I know y'all talking about the separation of particularly when it comes to religious schools, church and state. The people who go to these religious schools are taxpayers too. And if a religious school is better setting for your child, because some parents also want that religious element to it, then why are we trying to prevent that? It should be about choice. The choice should be public schools, charter schools, private schools, and the money ought to follow the child. I think public schools have to redesign what they do when it comes to education, because it's about the children. It's about what's best for them. And why are parents not choosing to send their children to public schools rather than charter and private schools? I think all the public schools in the Indianapolis area and other urban settings need to address that issue. We want what's best for our child. And to state legislators, Talk to the parents and the residents in these areas before you design a bill, particularly that's going to impact children of color. I would have liked to talk to the sponsors of House Bill 1136. I'm going to talk to you as a parent who has raised 4 children in Indianapolis, and all of my children, except my son went to both a charter school and a public school, benefited from the choices that they had. I've had 2 of my 4 children spend some time in charter schools, and all 4 of my children spend some time in public schools. The reason they did well is because of the decisions we made, my wife and I, about where we should send them. And number 2, we valued education in our home. You could not drop out of school and getting good grades was important to us. That's why we put our youngest son out of Shortridge, because he was not producing academically. And that was unsatisfactory to his mother and I. We got him somewhere where he could raise those grades in a setting that we thought he would thrive in. I think that's the issue. To the state representatives, to members of the Indiana Senate, House Bill 1136 is a start, but you cannot pass it as it is, because I don't think it's fair. We're encouraging, as leaders in the black community, for parents to make choices that is best for their children. Some years you may have more children in charter schools than public schools. Other years you may have more children in public schools than charter schools. But give parents the right to make that decision. I would say you need to go a step further and give parents a third option when it comes to private schools, and I believe that the money ought to follow the student. This will hold school systems accountable, and schools, in knowing that resources follow the students. Give mothers who don't have the resources, and fathers and parents in general who may be poor, an opportunity to get the best education for their child. And those parents who don't have the money to send their children to certain schools ought to be able to do that if they feel like that's what's best for their child. Most of us parents want what's best for our children, and we want them to thrive and to do well. I want my children to do better than me. My wife wants our children to do better than her. We have done well, but we want what's best for our kids. And I think that ought to be the focus. I think state legislators have to compromise. I think IPS has to compromise. I think Gary School District has to compromise. I think everybody has to make some adjustments and compromise and get at the table together so that we do what is best for the student. The student is the most important issue here. What is best for these students? Because we want students to do well and achieve academically. And students in Indianapolis and Gary ought to be doing as well as students in rural public schools or charter schools. We want everyone to thrive. This is Reverend Harrison on Real Talk. I hope you have enjoyed this conversation I've had with you today about House Bill 1136. I'm very passionate about the education of our children. I'm very passionate about parents having choices to make when it comes to the education of our children. And I hope you give me feedback for those of you who will listen to this on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And I hope to get it on Facebook and Twitter as we continue to have these conversations about the education of our children. I hope members of the House in Indiana and the Senate in Indiana will reach out and have conversations with leaders like myself. I'm trying to reach out to the co-sponsors of House Bill 1136. I want to have input not just as a leader, but as a parent. I've had 4 children that have gone through public schools and charter schools here in Indianapolis, so I bring a perspective. And I hope that you will get involved too, that ultimately we will do what is best for our children. This is Reverend Harrison on Real Talk. I hope that you have a blessed and an awesome day. And as you listen to this podcast, I hope that you will subscribe to it. I hope that you will put it on Facebook and Twitter so others could listen to it. And help me spread the word about this podcast that I do called Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. I pray that you have a blessed and awesome day. Be blessed.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.